My name is Noah Bennett. The moment I stepped onto the dance floor that night, the entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Not because I was important, but because the woman I was walking toward was someone no one had dared approach all evening. The Sterling Foundation's annual fundraising gala was being held at a luxury hotel in downtown Denver. Crystal lights bathed the grand ballroom in a soft golden glow. The gentle music blended with the conversations of wealthy guests, creating a picture-perfect scene that I had never truly belonged to. I was just a logistics coordinator, an ordinary employee who spent most of his time behind the scenes instead of under the spotlight. I took this job 2 years earlier when my mother went through a series of surgeries. The growing stack of medical bills forced me to work extra hours almost every day. That night, my responsibility was simple: checking the event schedule and coordinating with the service staff. Then she arrived. Ava Sterling, Richard Sterling's only daughter, the woman whose face had appeared in headlines across the country years before. The grand doors opened. Conversations around the room immediately slowed. Dozens of eyes turned toward her. Ava wore a simple yet elegant dark blue gown. She still carried herself with the confidence of someone who had once been comfortable in any crowd. But it wasn't the dress that caught people's attention. It was the scars stretching from her neck down her right arm. They were no longer as severe as they had looked in old photographs, but they were still enough to make people who had never experienced real pain feel uncomfortable. The whispers began almost instantly. No one spoke loudly. No one was openly rude. But avoidance can sometimes hurt more than insults. I could see it. One group after another quietly shifted their attention elsewhere. Men who had confidently negotiated multi-million-dollar deals suddenly found reasons to avoid meeting her eyes. Some looked down at their phones. Some pretended to be engaged in conversation. Others stared at her with pity. Ava kept a polite smile on her face. But the longer I watched, the more I noticed the exhaustion hidden beneath her calm expression. It wasn't the sadness of a bad day. It was the exhaustion of someone who had spent years being treated differently. The evening continued. When the band announced the traditional dance segment, couples gradually made their way onto the floor. Laughter filled the room. Elegant gowns swirled beneath the lights. Only one person remained standing still. Ava. Alone. I looked around. No one approached her. Not a single person. Even the guests who had eagerly shaken her father's hand only minutes earlier chose to stay where they were. Behind me, my manager quietly reminded me to return backstage. But I couldn't take my eyes off Ava, because in that moment, she wasn't a billionaire's daughter. She wasn't a familiar face from the media. She was simply a woman trying not to let anyone see how lonely she felt. I took a deep breath, then stepped away from my workstation. Each step seemed to make the room quieter. A few people turned their heads. Surprised expressions appeared everywhere. When I stopped in front of Ava, I saw genuine shock in her eyes. Perhaps even she hadn't expected anyone to walk over. I gave a small nod, then extended my hand, and in that exact moment, it felt as though the entire ballroom stopped moving. The following morning, I received a call from Sterling Group's headquarters. Just a few short words. They wanted to see me. That same day, during the drive to the office building, my mind raced through every possible worst-case scenario. Maybe I had crossed a line. Maybe an ordinary employee stepping onto the dance floor with Richard Sterling's daughter had upset someone. The towering glass building reflected the pale gray sky of an early winter morning in Denver. The top floor that was where Richard Sterling's office was located. When the doors opened, I found him standing beside a massive window overlooking the city. The powerful businessman didn't speak right away. He simply studied me for a few seconds, long enough for the tension inside me to grow. Finally, he broke the silence. He asked why I had invited Ava to dance. I gave him the only honest answer I had. Because she was standing there alone. Richard remained silent, then let out a quiet sigh. For the first time during the conversation, the hard expression on his face faded. He told me that Ava had not truly participated in any public event for almost a year. He had done everything he could to help his daughter return to a normal life. But every attempt had failed. The curious stares, the online comments, the pity from strangers, all of it had pushed her further into isolation. After the gala, for the first time in months, Ava had voluntarily spoken to him about her future. And what surprised Richard most was that she had mentioned me. More than once. I thought the meeting would end there. It didn't. To my surprise, Richard invited me to join one of the Sterling Foundation's community programs. a project dedicated to supporting burn survivors and firefighters' families. A few weeks later, I began working alongside Ava. At first, she remained reserved. During meetings, she usually sat at the far end of the room, listening far more than speaking. But every time she met people who had gone through experiences similar to hers, a different version of Ava emerged. Stronger, more resilient, especially when she met Lily, a 10-year-old girl who had suffered severe burns in a house fire. Lily always wore a mask and refused to look at herself in the mirror. Even when doctors encouraged her to slowly adjust to her new appearance, Ava watched the little girl for a long time, because she understood that feeling better than anyone else. Over the following weeks, Ava visited the hospital regularly. She sat beside Lily. She shared stories she had never told anyone before. Little by little, the distance between them disappeared. But just when things finally seemed to be getting better, a new challenge appeared. Several members of the board openly opposed Ava's growing presence in the media. They worried that her image might affect major donations. Negative articles spread quickly. I still remember that night. After a long meeting, I happened to see Ava sitting alone in her office. The screen in front of her was filled with cruel comments. She didn't cry. She didn't get angry. Somehow, that hurt even more. After a long silence, Ava spoke softly. The worst part isn't the scars. It's the feeling that people only see the scars. I didn't know how to respond. Because sometimes, the deepest wounds cannot be healed with words. A few days later, during a gathering for young burn patients, Ava unexpectedly stepped onto the stage. For the first time, she shared the full story of the fire that had changed her life. The entire room fell silent. No one said a word. Then something happened that nobody expected. Lily slowly removed her mask. She lifted her head and looked around the room. Then she smiled. In that moment, many people began to cry, including Ava. And I knew something had truly changed. My name is Noah Bennett. 1 year after that dance, I found myself standing once again in front of the grand entrance of the hotel where everything had begun. But this time, everything was different. Very different. Luxury cars still lined the red carpet. Business leaders, politicians, and major donors filled the venue just as they had the year before. But the atmosphere inside the ballroom was no longer the same. Because the woman everyone had once avoided had become the person everyone was waiting to see. Over the past year, the Sterling Foundation's Burn Survivor program had expanded across multiple states. Thousands of families received support. Hospitals began launching psychological recovery programs for patients living with permanent injuries. And Ava, she was no longer standing in the background. She had become a voice for people who once believed their lives were over after a single tragedy. I stood backstage watching everything unfold, just like I had on the very first night. But this time, no one saw me as an ordinary logistics coordinator. Many people within the foundation knew that I had helped oversee most of the community programs throughout the year. Some donors even went out of their way to shake my hand. Life has a strange way of changing. People who once overlooked you often begin to notice you when the results speak for themselves. But none of that was what mattered most to me. What mattered was Ava. The moment she entered the ballroom, the room fell quiet. Not because of pity, not because of curiosity, but because of respect. Ava wore a simple emerald green gown. No scarf. No makeup designed to hide her scars. No attempt to become the version of herself that others expected. She arrived exactly as she was. And for the first time, I saw that she was completely comfortable with it. The ceremony began. After the sponsors delivered their remarks, Ava stepped onto the stage. The spotlight found her. The room grew silent. I recognized several familiar faces. People who had doubted her. People who had opposed her public appearances. Now they listened with complete attention. Ava took a deep breath, then began telling her story. Not the story of the fire. Not the surgeries. Not the physical pain. She spoke about loneliness. About walking into a room and knowing that people were looking at her differently. About the days she locked herself inside her home because she could not face the way others saw her. Then she paused and smiled. What she said next left the entire ballroom speechless. She said the thing that changed her life was not money. Not doctors. Not time. It was a stranger who treated her like a normal human being. I could feel hundreds of eyes turning toward me at once. My heart pounded. But Ava continued. She spoke about that night. about the moment one person walked through a crowd's fear simply to offer a dance. When her speech ended, the entire ballroom rose to its feet. The applause lasted for a long time. Some people wiped away tears. Others lowered their heads in reflection. Then, at that exact moment, the band began playing the same song from the year before. The song that had changed both of our lives. Ava stepped down from the stage and walked directly toward me. Just as I had once walked toward her, she held out her hand. A gentle smile appeared on her face. Then she whispered softly, "This time, it's my turn to ask you." The music filled the room. We stepped onto the dance floor together. But there were no whispers anymore. No uncomfortable stares. Only applause and genuine smiles. As the melody slowed, Ava rested her head lightly against my shoulder. Then she said something I will remember for the rest of my life. "That day, you didn't save my life. You simply reminded me that it still had value." In that moment, I understood something important. Sometimes what changes a person's life is not a grand heroic act. Sometimes it is simply kindness arriving at exactly the right moment. And sometimes, a single step across a crowded room can become the beginning of an entirely new life. As this story comes to an end, its message is simple but powerful. Sometimes the people who change our lives are not the richest, strongest, or most important people in the room. They are the ones who choose kindness when everyone else chooses silence. Noah didn't see Ava's scars first. He saw her humanity. And that single moment of compassion helped change 2 lives forever. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments. What would you have done if you were standing in that ballroom? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more inspiring stories about courage, dignity, and the power of simple acts of kindness.